Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Chad Hart, Iowa State University Extension Economist, joins us for a crop market outlook update and talks regenerative diesel fuel. Lynn Williams, Merschman Seeds area sales manager, talks about harvest results for his area, including fungicide payoffs and planting dates. Yield data from our test plots have been released on merschmanseeds.com. It's time to cool down your bins. Iowa State University has a new article out that Turk discusses. We celebrate 3 years of Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe today. Thanks for listening and watching.
Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. This week we have a special guest with us. Lynn's with us and Ben's with us, but we also have Chad Hart, the Iowa State Extension Economist. And we'll start with you, Chad. There's a lot of things happening in the marketplace right now, and a lot of folks are very interested in what you think the future is going to look like and where we're at and where we're going.
Well, yeah, it's always a fun time to be in harvest. And let's face it, we've watched a big crop roll in. We've been moving through it fairly quickly, and now we got these rains. And so it's a good, let's call it, it's halftime at harvest time. And now let's reassess where we are and figure out what we're going to do the second half of the ball game.
That's right. What have you been seeing for yields so far, Chad? You travel a lot around the country a lot. Where were you earlier this week, for example? Earlier
this week, I was in Kentucky. I would tell you those folks down there were overjoyed with the crop that they've got. You know, when you look at USDA's estimates, it was showing basically record crops, especially in the eastern corn belt, and Kentucky was part of that mix. And what I saw throughout Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky was a really strong crop. And so we're bringing that in. I've been hearing a lot from my students here, across Iowa and Minnesota. And the words I hear more than likely are better than we expected. Been hearing a lot of, crop yields in the mid 200s, hearing a few threes every once in a while. And so it's been really encouraging, I would say, to hear those yield reports, especially given the weather conditions that we faced this year.
Yep. So the latest WASDE report come out and shows that they expect we're going to have enough corn and soybeans to make it through the year and actually have just a little bit of a build, but still tight supplies, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, when you think about it, it's amazing to think that, USDA saying a 15 billion bushel corn crop, biggest one we've ever had, and yet we still are seeing those tight stocks. And it speaks to the demand that we have seen for, both corn and soybeans. I should, put them both together here. The idea is that we have major crops coming in, but you look and we've had very strong international demand. Our export markets have been fantastic over the past 12 months. We're still doing pretty good there, not quite as strong as we were at this time last year. But when you look at that combined with solid domestic usage, soybean crush has been really strong over the past 18 months, especially. Corn usage on the ethanol side has been rocky, but we're on a big upswing right now. And so that's what helps hold prices where they are, given these great big crops.
And it looks like the in the foreseeable future, the demand for ethanol is going to stay pretty good, at least until we see what the report or what the government does with the renewable fuel standard. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think even sort of setting the RFS aside, I think we're looking in a pretty good spot for the ethanol industry. You mentioned the high energy prices right now, and that has opened up those ethanol margins. It's definitely led to a strong expansion here, especially over the past 3-4 weeks within the industry. And with those energy prices remaining high, I expect ethanol production to remain very strong. And that's sort of, like I say, setting aside the RFS, because I think when it comes right down to it, it will be those energy prices that really drive where biofuels will go over the next 18 months, especially here. And I think given where we've got oil and natural gas right now, that you'll continue to see strong demand for our biofuels out there with or without adjustments to the RFS.
So may not be a big event.
Well, I'm hoping not. Like I say, I think when you're looking here, I worry more about the RFS when our margins are tight to negative. When we've got nice positive margins within the industry, that means the market economics are really driving things as opposed to the government policies that are in place.
When you look in your crystal ball and you look next year, you got USDA saying that we've got a 5 in front of the corn number and we've got a 12 in front of the bean number. But what are the economics behind that? Because we have some higher priced inputs this year.
We do have some higher priced inputs, and I would say that's let's call it the built-in stabilizer right now. If you think about it, we have seen our crop prices rise in sort of tandem with our input cost. And that's helping sort of hold us, I won't say harmless, but the idea is it has protected us somewhat from the damage that could be done by these higher input costs. USDA's projection looking forward does align really well with where the futures market's at right now. When you look out there on, for example, the corn market, we see $5 futures on the board, not only for the 21 crop, but for the 22 crop and even for the 2023 crop. So you're seeing a market saying, hey, we see this demand platform for corn right now having some long legs as we look out there. Soybeans, very similar tale. The idea is as we look at the nearbys, yeah, they're in that $12 range, but even as we look out to 2022 and 2023, we still see that strength out there. And I think that does bode well for us. And that's part of why I would say we continue to see the strain on the input side. Crop prices are strong enough that it's keeping up demand for those inputs, even though those inputs do cost much more this year than they did last year.
Do you foresee any alternative crops taking the place of corn and soybeans for this year? Would we have maybe some marginal acres that guys don't want to pay a certain amount for, say, their fertilizer, and they go to a bean on bean or a wheat or a cotton in areas where that might be more in their line for what they can grow?
I think you could see that marginally, but for the most part, no. I think we're still betting on quite sizable acreage sticking within the corn and soybean complex. It's more a matter of, I think right now, a tilt between corn and soybeans. In fact, one of the things I've been watching is, estimates that have been placed out there for the 2022 acreage. And so I know, for example, Farm Futures did theirs in August, and then FAPRI did one in September, and Informa did one in October. And what they all had in common was they all basically said, corn and soybeans are going to capture a little over 180 million acres combined. What changed over the time and, amongst those surveys is that you saw the tilt from, let's call it, 94 million acres of corn and maybe 86, 87 million acres of soybeans to maybe a more 90-90 mix as we look out there. So I'm not necessarily seeing other crops gaining the acreage advantage. It's more this tilt between corn and soybeans.
Do you think that the price of, or the inputs and getting the inputs is going to have much of an effect on those come next spring if they can't get their inputs for a certain crop? I mean, what's your take on that supply shortage of inputs?
Do you think we're at?
Well, that's the deal. I think these not only the pricing, but you sort of bring up the supply side. Will we have access to some of these inputs in time? And I think that does influence plantings as we look this spring. I think the last time we really faced something like this, you have to go back to basically 2013, 2014, where we did see some acreage shift even in the springtime because of availability and pricing of inputs. I think we could see that same thing here. The challenge would be, again, what would you shift to? The later you shift, the more likely you stick within, let's call it the basics of what you know. So going back to the previous question, you're not likely to shift completely to another alternative crop. You're going to play within corn, beans. You're either going to shorten up your variety in terms of your seasonal, or you're going to, like I say, move from corn to beans to lessen that input cost hit.
So I got an interesting one to throw your direction. We had Jeff Reintz, a dealer of ours from Shell Rock, Iowa, on. He actually sold the land, if I believe the story correctly, to this Shell Rock biodiesel or regenerative diesel or whatever it is. And then we started having some conversations, and I've read some articles since that time frame that the demand for the soybeans in those 7 counties and around all of these plants that are going to be built, what does the long-term globe look like for soybean demand based on these plants that are going to be put in for diesel?
That's the deal. When I'm looking at the diesel market, I'll describe it this way. What we're definitely seeing is strong interest in renewable diesel. And this is where I sort of need to separate. Renewable diesel and biodiesel are not the same thing. So the idea is that, before what we had was a strong platform in biodiesel production. Renewable diesel is different in that you can still make it out of soybean oil. It's just that you're processing it in a different way, and it literally becomes diesel. So it has the same chemical footprint. It doesn't have the gelling problems. It can be used as 100% fuel, just like petroleum diesel can. And we are definitely seeing some strong interest, not only on that renewable diesel side, especially as we look at the West Coast, but we're also seeing interest in creating sustainable aviation fuel out of soybean oil as well. And that's what's really ignited the soybean oil market. And along with that has come all the other vegetable oils. I know, for example, when I was in Kentucky, I'm talking to it was the Distillers Grains Conference down there. So I'm talking to both the fuel ethanol guys, but also the distillers. So the bourbons, the whiskeys. And what they all told me was that they were seeing, a renewed market for their corn oil. And that oil market was reacting to renewable diesel push. As we're looking out there, if that really takes off, that could create another, let's call it platform, like we saw ethanol do for the corn market about 15, 20 years ago. Because if you think about the size of the diesel market versus the ability of soybeans to create renewable diesel, the diesel market could pull as many beans as we can produce if it really takes off and becomes that major fuel source as we're looking forward. So it's a very encouraging dynamic to see that we could see that much demand coming from the energy side versus the soybeans.
Do you know what the economics behind that? So I've had farmers question me, what is the break even for those plants? Is it, with cheap corn, ethanol is more productive, and what's the break even? Do you know what the economics are for a plant like that?
Well, that's the deal. I'd say we're still assessing what they actually are. When you're looking here, though, what seems to be indicated here is if you can give me $80 oil, crude oil, looks like we can support $60 soybean oil, or 60 cent per pound soybean oil. And so, considering that we spend most of our time with soybean oil in the 30s and even in the high 20s, what that tells you is there are some interesting economics around this that do look like it is profitable now to pursue renewable diesel, and that the energy markets are set up right now that it looks like that profitability will be here for at least the next year or two.
Good. Lynn, you got any more questions for?
I think I'm good.
Turk?
No, I think you've done a great job giving us an update on what's going on in the country out there, and we really appreciate your time with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So thanks, Chad. That was really informative. So what do you guys got? Lynn, what do you got going this week?
So this week I was out visiting with some customers. We're getting some soybean orders wrapped up and talking about corn. And some interesting things I'm kind of gathering from the countryside is about this late and early planted corn. And when I say early, I mean the stuff that was planted in end of April, 1st of May, versus when, around my area we had a long lull where they didn't get back in until like the 4th or 5th of June. Depending on where you're at, it was anywhere from a 40 to 50% yield reduction on the early versus late on basically the same varieties. Pretty similar soil types. So this year definitely was a big boon to get out there and get the planters in the field and get it out there. The other factor that was pretty interesting is the fungicide versus non-fungicide and corn. What kind of seeing, and I would say in Iowa, I'm seeing more, there was a huge advantage with this fungicide, up to 40 bushels is what I'm hearing from some people. Down in Missouri, it gets a little bit different. I think some of that might be, there was a lot of spots that didn't have tar spot that came in. Originally, I guess we're gonna eat crow a little bit, or I'll eat crow a little bit. We thought the southern rust and maybe the tar spot came in late enough that it didn't affect how we were filling out and getting through that section of the year. And it looks to be pretty tangible on that end of it, that it was a pretty good yield robber that we had there. And you mix some of that with what the weather conditions that we had during grain fill. But it looks to be something that guys definitely want to look at fungicide on their corn. I know around here, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some do it religiously, some don't do it at all. I would definitely look at least trying out a trial section of it on your corn. Beans, for the most part, I think a lot of the guys that I visit with are into the single application of fungicide on their soybeans. What is interesting is we are getting a group that is going to double application fungicide on their soybeans, and it was up to a 9 bushel difference between using a true foliar feed and fungicide, and then a second pass of fungicide later in the season versus just a single pass fungicide. So that's something that I look to maybe see continue in the future around here, looking at that earlier application of the fungicide, and then and seeing what we can kind of play with a little bit on the foliar feeding side as well.
So Ben, on that subject just a little bit, we talked about on the corn side of this thing, the rust comes in not every year, but that tar spot, if you had it this year, it's in the field. It's here to stay, isn't it?
That's correct.
And so a double fungicide might be what we're going to have to start looking at on that corn as well.
Yep, and I think that probably the correct timing on that is going to be do the fungicide that maybe a 2 mode of action instead of the 3, or your less expensive package. You do that right before tassel or right at tassel. Be monitoring it, be looking closer at it, and if 3 or 4 weeks later that another fungicide application, if more disease starts to set in, that's when we're going to need to be pulling the trigger, because that's the problem with fungicide, and I've talked about it on here before, is once you have the disease, you're too late. There's already yield loss associated with it at that point. So what you're doing is you're trying to overlap those fungicides to get you as much control as possible, but you're trying to be economical about it at the same time.
Boots on the ground.
That's right.
Don't be afraid to get out there and do some walking.
Yeah. What else you got, Ben?
So I got, this week, we had our 2021 test plot data. It gets updated every day into the portal, and it looks like this. So to get to it from our Merschman Seeds website, you go to the Merschman Advantage tab on the top right-hand corner of our website and scroll down to the very bottom of that, and it is the blue 2021 test plot data. I really like how our marketing department has it laid out this year. They got a nice table of contents that gives you page numbers to where you're looking into. It breaks it down by state and dealership, as well as where those dealerships are located. It's unique in the fact that it shows you a map of where all of these counties that the plots have been in, and then it dives into the actual plots that you're looking for. So pretty happy with it. It is getting updated, like I said, every day, so the more information that we get, we'll continue to fill these test plots out. Like I said in a couple of previous episodes, we're lagging on some of the southern ones, and they're starting to come in, but this last rain spell has definitely slowed us down again.
Like Chad said, we're in the halftime here, and farmers are taking advantage of it to look at yields.
Yep. The other thing that I would like to deliver from a housekeeping style tip is if you're a Merschman Seeds dealer and you are watching Cup of Joe, we have a new app for seed delivery. We're going to have more videos on that in the future, but if you are a dealer for Merschman Seeds, and you want to know up to the second when your seed is going to be delivered from West Point, Olmsted, or Tipton, we have this app that will allow you to know when that seed delivery is coming. Download it. Is called Merschman Delivers from the App Store. It's available on Apple products right now. So you're probably going to hear this commercial in the next few weeks a couple different times. So for our dealers out there that want to know when that truck's going to get there and to save them time, it's one of our things that we've added into our system to be efficient and try to help save our dealership's time. Mm-hmm. So that's what I have this week.
Very good. I just had a couple things. I've been watching the fall price discovery period for federal crop on corn and soybeans, and we just have a couple days left for the price discovery period. The good news is that soybeans are up 43 cents over the spring price election, 12.30, and on corn it is up 77 cents over the spring price selection, and the fall price discovery period right now is 5.35. So there's going to be some extra revenue out there for those that took the crop insurance that allows you to take advantage of that fall price discovery. So the other thing I had that I wanted to talk about is Iowa State come out with a really good article this week talking about time to cool your bins down, and I highly encourage everybody that combine beans when it was 80% or even corn and put it in a bin to make sure that you're running those fans and get it cooled down. You want to cool it down, but don't freeze it. But you want to get it down to that 30 to 40 degree range eventually. So it's very important to not forget what's in the bin, and because it can go out of condition pretty quickly in that top end, especially as that moisture migration in that bin moves around. So it's very, very important.
Yep. So. Check local listing, but I think we're in the 20s and 30s for lows in the next.
Yep. So it's a good time.
The next 7 days.
Good time. It doesn't take very long either. If it depends on the size of your fan. But we'll post that article. It has all the information in there on how long it takes to do what with what size fan. So it's very, very good article. So that brings me to the corny jokes, and
favorite part.
And I know it's your favorite part here. A lot of people's favorite part. So we'll get right into the Halloween jokes. What is a ghost's favorite thing to wear? Blue jeans. Blue jeans.
Oh, Joe give you these?
Yeah, Joe give you these. It's got his name right there.
Yep.
So, what do you call witches who live together? Broommates. Broommates. And the last one, but not least, is what does it take to become a ghost? Dead-ication.
Joe did good this week.
And with that, thank you for tuning in to Cup of Joe, and we'll see you next week.